Thanks for being on How to Remodeler, Steve. This is where we talk about our process, and we've already covered the initial phone call, our initial cost range, the pre-build has been introduced, and now we're really getting into where the client gets to interact a lot with us, and we get to solidify everything before contract. Tell me about your pre-build job as the pre-build manager, and this awesome list you've shown me has most of the steps. What's going on when you introduce a client to the pre-build, and how does it work?
Our job in that department is to take all the rest of the question marks we have and get the project over the finish line in terms of planning. So we try to take, Jeff talked about our figuring sheets, and they're very accurate, wonderful tools. But they don't necessarily overlay perfectly on a job-by-job basis, because that's when you get the individual details and complexities that each job brings you. So my job is to figure out where those things are, make sure that we address them, and then make sure that the plan on how we're going to address them is clear, both to the homeowner and to our crews and subcontractors. So the fewer decisions that have to be made on site, the fewer misconceptions there are, fewer stumbling blocks there are, the job runs more smoothly, and nobody gets surprised and nobody gets upset, ideally.
Yes, that does sound ideal. And you're mentioning that figuring sheet, it's got placeholder prices for selections, more or less. Those are called allowances, and they're kind of an estimate if you choose right in the middle of the line. And that's everything from your faucets, your ceiling fans, your the things that clients need to choose in order to get the design down pat. And so the selections and pre-build process clears that up because they're making actual selections. How does that turn into the project?
The same is true on all levels of our pricing sheet, whether it's allowances or unit pricing that we use for subcontractor trade, situations like drywall, for example. There's a unit price per square foot. But back to your question on allowances, we have what we call slightly above middle of the road. We like to give people plenty of room to make decisions. If they, there's, certainly plenty of room ahead on top of our allowances, because you can spend as much as you want. But we also don't like to have our allowances so low that there's no diversity of choice. So a little bit above middle of the road, so we give people some room to move, and then we guide them in certain directions. I can help as much as they'd like me to, as far as helping them shop online, usually is what we do when it comes to specific items like kitchen faucets, light fixtures, things of that nature. And then also part of my job then is to make sure what they're choosing integrates with the other choices they've made. If they have a sink that requires an 8-inch spread vanity faucet, then they choose a single hole faucet. I get to tell them, let's find something similar to that, but that will work for your application. When it comes to the subcontractor agreement stuff, or the subcontractor quoting, again, every job has its own complexity, right? So our figuring sheet is updated constantly as market prices change. It's usually pretty accurate on straightforward run-of-the-mill stuff. So let's say we have 500 square foot of drywall to do in a project. Our numbers should be fairly close, but we always allow our subcontractors to review the plans of the scope. We often take them out to the job to take a look at the site conditions as well. And our drywall guy might say, yeah, that's great. It's so many dollars at the regular square foot allowance, but I've got to carry all these sheets up that flight of stairs, and that's going to take a long time. I have to add a little bit for that. Or he might say, this is just 4 walls in a garage. We do an accessory dwelling unit or just a standalone garage, and you've got a ceiling and 4 walls and they can just run. That's probably not going to be as much. And we always let the customer know, look, some of these things as we're going through are going to come in. And I explain the concept of what the unit pricing is and allowance pricing is, and say what we're doing now is, instead of being at a very close ballpark, we're going to turn it into an exact price that we can sign a contract on. And all that unit pricing and allowance, some will be a little bit above, some will be a little bit under. Generally, we're right around where we want to be, but I get to keep a running tab as decisions are made, as subcontractor quotes come in. I can see what's happening to the budget, and I can let them know, hey, we're getting a little bit out of control, or you're looking good, or whatever. We try to have those conversations along the way.
Amazing. It sounds really deep, and like you're really forming the job to a T, 100%. It went from the nebulous discussions to now a true list with URLs to fixtures, to make orders, to see pricing, to calculate everything before we get to fixed price contract.
That's right.
That's kind of that's the job.
That's the job.
That's everything.
That's the job. And it's all been a learn as you go process. I mean, when I started, I wasn't the pre-build manager. I came in as like the helper, and the level of detail we had then was kind of astonishing to me. But in the year and almost 2 years now that I've been in the process, the amount more that we have as opposed to then is also astounding. And what happens is we'll have a situation on site where something wasn't thought of or something wasn't clear. And every time something like that happens, our job is then to make sure the communication between, we don't silo off the production team versus the estimating team or the pre-built team. Communication has to run both ways. So if I know that we put a job out to them and there was a problem on site because they didn't understand something, then I can take a look at what we did on our side and how can we make sure that the next time something similar to that comes along, it's understandable. The most recent one that comes to mind was, we have different categories for tile work in our project management software, the selections platform. And we separated out whether it's going to be just a tile surround and a shower, or whether it's a custom shower, or whether it's wainscoting, or whether it's floor tile. It's different. And we have a template of the information that we need to, it's like we're checking boxes. We address all these different pieces of information. And one thing we didn't have in shower surrounds was wall height. More often than not, it's going to be a 7 foot. Sometimes you have an 8 foot ceiling and it'll go to 8 foot, but we weren't specifying that. And it's one of those things that more often than not, it is easily dealt with. And so no one really thought twice about it. But we ended up finally with a situation where that little small piece of information created a conflict on site. It's not fair to our crew members, it's not fair to our homeowners to have that. So the easy fix is, it's unfortunate that it happened, but the easy fix is we go in and we have a template that we use and we just added a line to the template. So now when a project is created in the first place and we're importing the template information to the different categories that we're going to use, anyone who's got my job and is inputting all the final information that happens to have a shower is going to have a line that says, why? And when we're reviewing the final job, if that question's not answered, we don't pass it on.
Yeah.
And there's at this point, probably thousands of little details like that all peppered throughout the selections process that we got to take care of.
Thousands. That's amazing. And that's the differentiation, the process between, and maybe someone's professional experience is writing it down and being able to pass it on to the next person in a way that they can use. And
That's right.
And so you don't lose that if you're moving people into a different position. You get to retain that as part of our standard operating procedure.
Exactly.
Really neat. Well, thank you so much for talking about just this slice of the pre-build. It's a massive topic. So we're going to return to this as this sort of clears up in people's mind and they get the full scope of our process. So we'll kind of hit the big picture, get to that contract point, talk about some of the build aspects, but we'll revisit the pre-build and all the different parts of that. Wow. Definitely make sure to subscribe on YouTube, see us on Facebook, join our Facebook group if you want to join the discussion with other remodelers, and you can even see our shorts on Instagram. We put this stuff everywhere. Thank you again, Steve, for being on HTR.
Wonderful. Thanks.